This event will be recorded for the Interfaith Philadelphia community. If you're uncomfortable with being recorded, you can go off of video or let me know in a direct message in the chat. Welcome, everyone. We'll just spend one more minute and then we will get started with our introduction. Wonderful. We've reached 11:05. Thank you all for being here. It's so great to see your faces. I'll let other people in as we go if we have some late arrivals. And thank you to our lovely speakers. Pamela is going to get us started with an introduction.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? We are here today at Storytelling in the Pandemic. Our goal today is to discuss, engage, and interact with each other as to our challenges that we've had as you have been leaders of religious faith communities and the challenges that you have faced during the pandemic and reaching out to communities and your congregations. We're also going to pose questions regarding your ability to change and what changes that you've had to make. Were they positive changes? Were they negative changes because of the pandemic? And overcoming overall your ability for your congregation and communities to come together because of the pandemic. The questions that we will be asking are questions to consider to ask during your during the panel speaking. The questions that they will be speaking to will be: how has COVID-19 impacted your personal faith journey? How has COVID-19 impacted the ability of your congregation and communities to come together? What changes have your congregations and communities had to make because of the pandemic? Were any of these changes positive? How have you or other leaders in your community overcome the challenges of the pandemic? I also like to add that what I like about the Interfaith panel talks is that everyone's welcome to speak. Everyone's opinion is respected. This is a safe place to chat, to talk, to speak your mind, and we ask for everyone to be respectable of other people's opinion, because it is their opinion, as well as keeping to the speaking time limit that we talked about. But enjoy. I looked forward to this. I enjoyed planning this under Aziz and Rachel, and I'm sure everyone will have a great time.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm going to add the questions that we asked the speakers to consider. I'm going to put them in the chat so that our listeners can follow along, and also as a good reminder for our speakers if they need it. So here you go. Those are our questions. Those are our guiding questions. I'm going to introduce each speaker as we go. Actually, I'll say everyone now, and then I'll go through each individual person when it's their turn. And Pamela is going to help us with timekeeping. So thank you so much for that. So today we have Yashpal Singh Bains from the Sikh community. Thank you so much for being here. We have Geeti Etimad from the Baha'i community. We have Dave Eckert from the Christian community. We have Jyotsna Ketar from the Hindu community. Aziz Natu from the Muslim community. And Sean Zevitt from the Jewish community. So we're really lucky to have such a lovely, diverse group to speak to our questions and to consider some really kind of big topics. So thank you all for your courage and your openness today. So we're going to start with Yashpal, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us.
Rachel, thank you. And thank you all for joining in. I'm Yashpal Singh Bains from Sikh community, member of Philadelphia Sikh Society. It's in Upper Darby. I will tell a little bit about myself. I'm a retired professional civil engineer. Hung up my gloves about 2 years ago, and now I have a full-time second job, or second profession, I should say, interfaith communities and, interfacing with them, and also working with the youth of Sikh community, and as well as the youth from other, faiths. And I'm a member of Global Sikh Council. I'm a chair of the Heritage Committee, and part of that, what I do is interface with the interfaith world, locally, nationally, or internationally. And I try to involve the youth, which is a big challenge. I'm sure all of you will agree with me, because I don't see any youth here. We all see, little older, old people, I guess. So that was, and that's part of my passion, connecting the youth to the faith, and also bringing the youth from other faiths to interconnect the youth. So that's, a part of what I do. And I will, that was my brief introduction. I'll start with how COVID has impacted my personal faith journey. Now, Sikh faith, like all other faiths, we firmly believe that whatever happens in our life or on our planet, Earth, it happens by the will of God, the Creator, our Creator of the humans and the planet and the whole universe. So that, I think, the COVID, I consider as we received it based on the will of God, and also the strength to face it is given by the God and our Creator also. So we have a challenge and we have strength to face it. Now, this is will of God is a part of acceptance in my faith, and I'm sure it is part of all the other faiths also. Acceptance of the will of God. Now, sometimes when we run into great challenges, we do complain and say, why me, God? And that's part of being human. That's our limitation. Just a second, please. Now, the COVID, it has been the greatest challenge for our local Sikh community, nationally, and obviously globally. And I've been involved because of the, I'm a member of the Global Sikh Council. I've been involved internationally also, especially in India and, the other countries wherever, Sikh community is. And what I have noticed that COVID has brought something, it has brought out the goodness in humanity to help each other and take care of each other. And that's the best part or the positive thing which, COVID has given us all. Coming together locally, nationally, and globally. And, we have, look at the news globally and we see it, on the news every single day. That, what were our challenges were and what, how we handle those challenges. Now, coming together as a community, how we handled it in Philadelphia, in my place of worship, and also in Sikh faith, Sikh community, in general. Now, we came together many different ways in the Sikh community. First and foremost was taking care of the community by reducing or shutting down the gatherings when required. Most of the gurdwaras were, that's our place of worship, they were closed for almost 6 months at the start of the COVID, as directed by the health authorities, local health authorities. And when they opened the congregation, strict rules for masking, distancing, and ventilation were adhered to by the Gurdwara management. It was a pleasant surprise that there were not very many complaints from the congregation. Health was everyone's primary concern. Langar, a community meal at the Gurdwara, is a centuries-old institution for the Sikhs. So during the pandemic, instead of serving a freshly cooked meal, packaged meals were served to the congregation to keep COVID in check. So that's what we did as a community. And secondly, Sikh community came together to help the local programs to serve food to the poor and needy. Joining our community, joined the various local organizations to help them.
Excuse me.
Now,
we've reached our time, Yashpal. I hope maybe we can have some time at the end where you can answer some more questions about the impact.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Rachel.
Mm-hmm. So if we just take one moment to close our eyes and take a deep breath and to allow the information that we've received to sort of pass into our body. And then with our exhale, allow it to pass out. And again. Thank you so much for sharing. Now we would like to move on to Geeti so that we can learn about the impacts of COVID-19 in the Baha'i community and in her community.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank the Interfaith Center, Interfaith Philadelphia, to do these noble things and to let different faiths to contribute to what each faith did individually. I'm a pediatrician. I'm at the faculty at Temple University Medical School. In addition to be a co-founder of Interfaith Center, I am also very much involved at Temple University Dialogue Institute. And interfaith dialogue is truly my passion. Because I'm a teacher, I am going to go through different stages of what our community did and what as an individual I did. I may not answer the 3 questions you have in 1, 2, 3, but during my 5 minutes, 6 minutes talk, I will try to answer all the questions. Locally, our Greater Philadelphia Baha'i community decided to take advantage of the Zoom. And it was truly a very productive and very positive experience during these 2 years, because the local community got connected together very much. And we truly tried to engage our junior youth, our young adults, and even the elders in this community actions. Because of the murder of George Floyd, locally we decided to educate ourselves about Black history. So we have had and we have been having once a month conversation. We call it uncomfortable conversation on Zoom, that we bring a Black person and a white person to tell their personal stories. And these personal stories have been very effective in order to understand each other and to see what African American went through. And it has been going on. We have 60, 70 individuals who participate every week. And it is a very positive experience. I myself, I thought I know about Black history because I wasn't born in the United States. I was born in Iran and then I came as a student. But I learned so much about Black history. I understand what they went, why they went through, and what is happening, if there is anything I can do. So this was the local, and the connectiveness of different age group has been truly amazing through all of these conversations. Nationally, because of Zoom, I always say, God, or whatever you want to say, gave us COVID, but at the same time gave us Zoom. And I think this Zoom has been a miracle, because nationally, the Baha'i community of United States, we have been meeting many, many times. I would say that many times a week. And we get the community together. If somebody dies, we go to their memorial. If somebody has something to use, we use devotional. We pray together. We actually deepen ourselves in different scientific things. There are classes that we all, so we know like what the Baha'is of California are doing during this Zoom, during this COVID period. We know what Arizona youth are doing. So that is national. Internationally, Baha'i community is spread all over the world. Just last week, we met via Zoom, and about 70 people participated, actually from Africa and the Central Republic of Congo. They came, their Baha'i group, they came and they talked about what they have done during their Zoom, during the COVID. How did they deal with not having been vaccinated? What they do with their sick people? And how do they do to connect to each other and support each other? So as a person, personally, of course, there is nothing like person-to-person meeting, but as a person, I learn about the Black history, and also I learn about other people's activity in the United States. I learn about what our young people are thinking. Being a pediatrician, I have been very interested in the way our young people are going through. As you know, the incidence of suicide in even junior high school, in high school, has gone up. So we have been trying to support our youth during these hard times. So in general, I would say that, it has been positive. We try to take this horrible pandemic and take some positive things about these positive times. What we can do and how we can connect each other. Especially, we think that intergenerational connectiveness is very important. I think, Pamela, I think my time is almost done. I'm going to stop here.
Thank you,
So
Gayatri.
yes, in general has been positive, productive, and interconnectiveness with the global Baha'i community has been very interesting.
Thank you, Gayatri. That sounds like such a blessing. So along that line, let's all give ourselves a squeeze on either arm, like a hug. Close our eyes and just say hello to our body and say, I love you. Breathing in all that we just heard, and then breathing it out, letting it out so it's no longer held in our body. By the way, this was Sean's idea, and I think it's wonderful. Have a little palate cleanser between speakers. So thank you for that idea. So now we will move on to Dave, and he will tell us about his experience with the Christian community during this time.
Well, thank you everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak with you, Interfaith Philadelphia. I appreciate it, Aziz, for being my connector point as a colleague. I do a couple different things. I'm bivocational. I am both the director of Intersect, which is an initiative that supports people at the intersection of faith and mental health for access services. And I'm also a pastor at a church. So I live and work in Montgomery County. And so I'll be speaking out of both of those experiences and what I have to share. First, I'll start with my personal faith journey amidst the pandemic. There's a couple ways in which I think the pandemic was forcing me to go more deeply into my faith. One had to do with the common experience I and others had of realizing how much we can't control the world around us. Over and over again, I had people sharing with me that they were struggling with control during the pandemic because as much as they tried to do certain things, they couldn't stop from a new variation, of COVID coming out, or something happening in the news that would further increase their anxiety. And so I think one lesson for me was to focus on my calling more than on control, because amidst all that I could not change, all that I could not control, one thing that remained the same was my calling as a follower of Jesus to represent him in love to those around me. Jesus said to his followers, go and make disciples. And therefore that starts with representing him well. And I could do that regardless of what the pandemic was bringing or not bringing, and regardless of what I could or could not control. So focusing on calling more than control. A second had to do with the area of dealing with the anxiety that came up, which wasn't just an issue of control, though it was connected. One thing that a lot of people around me were dealing with was actually death anxiety. It's something that as a mental health professional, there's a lot being written about and has been written about, because you're hearing numbers in the news of people during the pandemic dying And people are having to ask themselves, how do I cope with this reality that this could be me? And one of the things that I realized is, despite all of the good coping mechanisms that existed in the literature on this issue of death anxiety, even people who didn't believe in God told me that it was limited. And therefore, one of the ways in which it took me again deeper into my faith was the idea of going beyond coping to hoping. You know, for a Christian, we've just finished with Easter, or Easter has just begun, in which for us as Christians, our focus is on the resurrection of Jesus and on the hope of our own resurrection and eternal life. And therefore, this was a time where that belief wasn't just abstract, but very physical and real. And therefore, going beyond coping to hoping, going deeper into the hope that I have as a follower of Jesus, was really significant for me during the pandemic. Those were ways in which my own individual journey was impacted. And I had to go there to my faith for deeper resources during the pandemic. But I also wanted to speak, as each speaker has, on corporate issues during the pandemic. How has this impacted the community in which I serve? And there were ways in which it brought our community together, and ways in which it provided not opportunities, but challenges to our community. So a word about the opportunity and then a word about the challenge. The opportunity was that there were people in the faith community who wanted to serve the needs that were out there, but were stuck in their homes wondering, where are those needs? I want to serve. How do I do it? Meanwhile, those of us who worked in human services are saying, we hear about needs every day coming up. And how do we get more help with those needs? And so at Intersect, we started a care portal, the Intersect Care Portal, where we would, on a new Facebook page, we would post the needs in the community that we were hearing about amidst the homeless, for example. And then people in the faith community were joining this portal and responding to the physical, financial, relational needs that they were being told about. And so we've seen hundreds of needs met during the pandemic by connecting community needs with faith communities wanting to help. So that was really inspiring. The challenge for me and for my community was that the pandemic brought out a lot of political conflict and political polarization around, for example, perspectives on restrictions around the pandemic, perspectives on how we should think about critical theory after the George Floyd murder. And what that called upon us to do was to be encouraging our community to think as followers of Jesus rather than as Republicans and Democrats. So when it came to restrictions, we are called to bear with one another regardless of what convictions we have. We're called to love our neighbor regardless of what convictions we have. We're called to unity based on Jesus' teachings, regardless of what political convictions we have. When it comes to race, regardless of what you think about finer points of critical theory, we're called as Christians to recognize that we all have within ourselves sin. We all have a propensity for any sin, including racism. And therefore, we need to be called upon by Christ to be able to deal with that within ourselves and to be able to love all people regardless. As MLK put it in Letter to a Birmingham Jail, where he was speaking to Christians, white Christians, he had said, you need to think more like Christians. You need to go deeper into the resources of Scripture, books like Amos and other prophetic books. And by going deeper into your own faith, not outside of it, you'll find the resources to cause you not just to wait to act, but to act now for the sake of those who are vulnerable and marginalized in society. And so those were just a few ways. I hope I haven't gone over my time, but those are a few ways, both individually and corporately, I found myself and my Christian community called upon to go deeper into our faith in order to respond to the challenges that we were facing. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you so much, Dave. And those are some great reminders there at the end. The unity and being there for the vulnerable in our communities. So thank you for that reminder. So breathing in And this time, let's make a little sphere with our hands. This will create like a kind of closed circuit of unity with our own body. So breathing in deep, taking in the wonderful messages and then letting them go. Breathing in deep again. And then letting out any more. Rolling our shoulders. Any other movement that helps in letting go. And now we move to Jo and her perspective on the pandemic and her experience in the Hindu community.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And it's wonderful to see everyone from different faiths. Although I do miss the in-person meetings. And I'm not shameless to say that I miss the food because that's like such a central part of any faith. I mean, I just have to be reminded that I'm from the Hindu faith sometimes because I feel like I belong everywhere. Right. There's a common thread in all our faiths. I mean, there are happy faces when you go to a congregation, there are families, there are the support for each other. And yeah, it ends with food, of course, right? So in that way, the Hindu community is not very different. But I didn't introduce myself. So I'm going to start with introducing myself. I'm Jyotsna Ketar. Yes, my dad picked a name which is pretty unpronounceable. Don't worry, even my fellow Indian people can't get my name right. It means moonlight. It's from a Sanskrit. Sanskrit is a very ancient language in India. All the Indian languages are based out of Sanskrit, and my father is a Sanskrit scholar. So when a girl was born, he kept a difficult name, but I did have a lot of pet names that my cousins and friends and everybody call me. So that's what it is. I used to be in the IT profession for over 20 years. And I gave it all up to follow my passion and purpose, which is to mentor youth. And so, yes, I'm going to reach out to you, Yashpal, because I'm doing research on Gen Z and their productivity. So my whole business and my coaching is centered around Gen Z. I have a fairly good insight into how they work. I mean, or how they work with the phone in their hands all the time. So yes, that youth is my whole passion. So I started off as being an ADHD, ASD study skills coach. Then I moved around and I started doing research and learning from Peg Dawson, who's a leading psychologist on executive functioning skills, which is the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So I started coaching them. Then people approached me and said, oh, help us with college. So yes, I went to UC Berkeley to get my college counseling done. And now I have a pretty good business. I've figured like where the most scholarships are, and I'm helping students get the most money and not break their parents' bank going to college. And now students from UC Berkeley, they sort of shadow me to learn my counseling methods and everything. So that's what I do for a profession. And I'm actively involved in the interfaith. Rather, I tag along Archana. So I'm her sidekick. I mean, she's like, Jo, I'm going here. Oh, let's go. I'm like, yeah, let's go. You're going where? I don't care. I'll just get my car. We'll just go there. She's like, no, we'll go to the Beth Israel thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm there. So she's the one who introduced me, and it's wonderful. I've been everywhere, and yeah, and Hinduism is no different. It's just the way it's all done, but the thread is very common. And I'm going to recite Gayatri Mantra, which is basically to give us like peace and prosperity. So I'm going to recite that. Om Bhurbo Swaha Tatsuvatarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat. So this is wishing success to everybody. So I did make my son, and I asked a lot of people around. I do run a Facebook group with parents, and I posed the exact same questions that you had because I wanted to understand what their thoughts were. And it's a very, very valid and important question as to how the pandemic impacted their personal faith. For me personally, it was extremely difficult to start off with because the Hindu temple, is a place where we congregate, and it was just also for socializing, spiritualness. There is a priest, and I mean, everything was like sort of taken away. But that didn't stop us and my family from practicing our faith. We started doing pujas or the ceremonies, mini ceremonies right at home, listening to the YouTube videos and everything. We missed the huge gathering, the sacredness of it, but we did make up by doing things together. So that is how COVID-19 impacted our personal faith. And with regards to the congregation and the community, yeah, of course, along with doing pujas, everything was virtual. I mean, the temple priests were doing the events virtually, and the Hindu temples did follow the strict rules for social distancing and COVID-19 thing. And we continued with that, but everything was in a virtual setting. And of course, we had to adapt, right? Flexibility and being nimble is extremely important. I mean, the pandemic, was such a huge thing. We all had to adjust. And but it was very unnerving to hear back home our families and all the gory images that the media likes to convey. It was really, really hurtful when there were so many images of pyres being burnt, like in Hindu, your body is burnt. I mean, it was all shown on TV, which I found was very hurtful. That's something sacred and personal, right? The whole social media and the news kept showing so many images of India. Like, that was something that didn't sit well with me and our community. Yes, we were suffering, but there was a level of dignity that was kind of lost, and that was something that was shocking. That was the negative side of the pandemic, in my opinion. But the positive parts of it was we had to rely on one another, our families and everything. And during the sacred thread change ceremony that we do every year, we actually had an opportunity to collaborate with people in India, right? If it were not for the pandemic, my husband and sons would have gone to the temple and just done it on their own. But it was sort of a virtual community gathering where everybody from India gathered at a certain time and did it virtually, right? So we had to adapt. But we continued practicing our faith. It was sort of a refuge from everything that was going around us. Faith was something that we held on to, but we had to do it, within ourselves, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that you brought up some of the difficult and the heavy and the lightness and the adaptation and all the ways in which we've had to adjust. And it's very true that there have been some very heartbreaking moments. And so my invitation for those of us with glasses is to take off your glasses. We're going to rub our hands together, warm up our hands, and then place them on our face. This is a comforting feeling for me. I don't know if it is for you. It's like a way of holding yourself in like a face hug. We can take some deep breaths while we're here. Thank you so much. And now we move to Aziz, who will be sharing his experience during this time in the many communities that he works with, and in particular, the Muslim community.
Thank you, Rachel. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, you all, or y'all, as we say in the South. So good to see some amazing old friends and colleagues and meet new ones. So I'm a Muslim interfaith teacher and preacher, hailing from Africa, and deeply invested in multiple interfaith peace, dialogue, and justice initiatives. I want to qualify that my speech or report does not represent any specific faith tradition within the rich diversity of interpretations in Islam, but it is a synthesis of the collective experience of around 100,000 Muslims that live in our area. Conceptually in Islam, human beings are understood to be made from a mold of clay into which God breathed his ruh, his spirit, and thus created mankind. Therefore, we are a combination of both human and divine, meaning human with a divine spark. Now, due to human imperfection and distractions of life, the spiritual often takes a back seat, and sometimes the physical aspect is given undue dominance. And sometimes Allah provides opportunities for us to recalibrate ourselves to harmonize the balance between the deen and the dunya, meaning the physical and the spiritual. The pandemic provided such an opportunity to create space to reorient ourselves to the inner self, a sort of reset. On computer terms, you would say Control-Alt-Delete. I might add that our ongoing month of Ramadan right now provides us an opportunity to rebalance every year, where we focus inwards with abundant charity, prayer, abstinence, and self-reflection. Back to the pandemic. With the reduction or a pause in the physical contact, we encourage our community to redirect their energies on self-reflection, and we found some amazing opportunities for online and virtual prayers, discussions, and debate portals. If there was a single agent of connectivity to be named, it would be what I call Sheikh Zoom, Pastor Zoom. Zoom just became the connective tissue, a rich source for people coming together to share resources and experiences. The pandemic also produced a multiplicity of opportunities for people with skills to share and teach in areas within matters of faith, as well as outside of faith. So we had legal experts and lawyers devote time to teach people how to prepare their wills and trusts free of charge as service to the community. We had financial experts teach community members how to invest, how to craft documents, learn accounting, and related skills. The best examples actually came from physical community volunteers who went out of their way to deliver food, medicine, supplies, and other essentials to those who were needy and vulnerable. I was also a part of a team that reached out to thousands of members every single week to check on their status and their needs. I would say the most affected sector was the elderly and the aged. They were the most lonely and disconnected, and volunteers delivered preloaded tablets for them to pass their time and connect to various community programs and other sources of entertainment. We had one example of an online reunion of childhood sweethearts from Uganda who had been separated, I think, for about 50 some odd years when they were teens. and both had lost their spouses, and somehow they reconnected. So, amazing stuff. I think as a congregation, while we really missed praying and breaking bread together, the social connective tissue has definitely been strained, but we have become richer and more resilient for the experience, and our faith, I believe, has matured consequently. Unfortunately, we have also suffered death and suffering, and we offer our prayers for their souls and grieve collectively. In our scripture, the Holy Quran, we are assured that after every hardship, Allah provides ease, and that we must persevere. Since all of our prophets, from the prophets of the Old Testament to the New Testament, and also prophets of the non-Abrahamic family, like our Hindu, Buddhist, and Baha'i and Sikh brothers and sisters, we have all been tested. And those prophets have always been tested, and they have persevered through their firmness in faith. And we believe outside also of our faith in the family of humanity. I think I'll pause here. I think I've reached my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Aziz. I love the contributions to the community and also the unity that we ended with. So thank you so much for that. So speaking of unity, I'm sort of feel like I'm called to do a hand gesture. So if we put our wrists together and then we bring our pinkies together and our thumbs together, we're sort of creating a globe where we're holding the world. So this can bring us all together, and we can take some deep breaths as we do this. I also feel like I'm holding a cup of love and support for all of us. So we can take in everything that Aziz was sharing and then let it go. And now we move to Sean, who will be sharing his perspective and representing the Jewish community.
Thank you so much on behalf of myself and the many birds chirping outside the synagogue here in Maniac Roxborough at Mishkan Shalom, where I serve as rabbi, and also here representing the Reconstructionist Rabbinical Association. And I also have a teaching and leadership role in the Jewish Renewal World, training spiritual directors and clergy students of the next generation. Thank you so much, Rachel, for the cornucopia of I think they moved from palate cleansers to actual substantive practices of their own, and feel like a string of pearls. And I feel honored to join my colleagues here and hopefully offering another pearl on the chain of our soul paths. I want to sing a line that was written by Karai Jewel Lingo in her book, We Were Made for These Times, and the melody by Reverend Linda Noonan of Chestnut Hill United, which we sing in our synagogue sometimes too, and began singing that when the pandemic arose. We were made for these times. We were made for these times, and like gold, we'll keep on shining. We were made for these times. I use that to frame my words today from my as unyet published May-June newsletter article. So you're getting it before the whole congregation does. Don't tell anybody what I'm saying here. A year ago at this time, I titled my newsletter article, We Were Made for These Times, taking the lead of African-American writer Karai Jewel Lingo, whose book by that title addresses and gives directions to what we have experienced even more so since its publication. That we all go through times when it feels like the ground is being pulled out from under us. I drew on our people's timeless teaching in this last couple of years on what it means to meet the challenges of our times with faith and commitment in the face of the unknown and constantly shifting landscapes of our individual and collective lives. And certainly that's been in 4,000 years of our Jewish people's experience, often intensely experienced. And even coming here right after Holy Week and Passover in particular, where Pharaoh's constant response to Moses' desire for liberation for a mixed multitude, for all people, as well as for Hebrew tribes, his response was, Lo nedam anavod et Yah ad bo'enu shama. I can't tell you exactly how we will serve until we actually get to the place that we're meant to be. So all I can do is give you an approximation, and just keep saying freedom is the answer here. Possibility, not imprisonment and oppression. And so I've tried to take guidance of that on the personal level as well. And as I go on to write here, at the same time, the events over time have not left me or any of us unimpacted observers to events. Losing both my parents in these pandemic times, the transitions and growing needs in our own community as we return in person and with online offerings, including hybrid ones, social justice and ecological issues, tensions and violence in Israel and Palestine, and the devastating war in Ukraine are only a few of life's unfolding moments and ongoing events. In the words of Wendell Berry, it may be that when we no longer know what to do, we have come to our real work. And then when we no longer know which way to go, we've come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is one that sings. So all this is to say, while I still find inspiration in the idea that we were made for these times, it no longer is the full truth for me as we enter what is the third year now of pandemic times. More and more I experience that these times are remaking us. My theology can no longer sustain the idea that all was meant for this moment, that God sent something, or that there's a God outside of us doing that. That has been burned away by my personal and collective losses. And yet I still feel God is the call towards faith and hope, and the understanding that all did not arrive at this moment, but rather, like the Talmud, the ancient Jewish sages said, everything has been laid out and we have total free choice. Now go build your life on that. And so each choice, each moment with faith and with unpredictability, how we meet and adapt to the constant change of circumstance, the eruption of events, and pivot in the face of new tributaries of possibility and difficulty, for me I see as our congregational call and certainly my individual call. I'll leave it to years and those who will come long after us to reflect and say, this is what these times were made for. For now, I feel we are being made by these times, and that's the song that I sing. And so I share, with so many of you who have spoken, the parallel of connection and isolation, of being at my own stage of life, of the congregation's journey, the ascension of extroverts feeling like it's Eden once again, introverts and extroverts, including like myself, feeling connection and isolation, feeling emptiness when the Zoom service ends and I stand looking at my living room bookcase yet once again without any follow-up conversations. I watch as many more colleagues drop out, particularly in their 30s to 50s, and side by side, including many congregations and faith leaders in our circle, have chosen to exit, to move laterally to other deployments, or to leave serving as faith leaders altogether. That is a truth of our time as well. And so we've also brought in new offerings. We as a synagogue have daily offerings like we've never had before. People have risen to offer things, some of which are going to stay online. They will never migrate in person because they would collapse under the expectation of showing up together at the synagogue. And we're open, but we're still not fully there. Not everybody wants to be inside. So we've invested in a professional camera which is personed by our volunteers who love to sign up for it, to experiment with angles and close-ups and give a dynamic experience and not just a flat live streaming experience, to try to capture the essence of the experience in both senses. And we established digital membership categories for people outside of Philadelphia to be more connected on an ongoing basis. We moved our school to Saturday so that Shabbat was the one unifying experience and not just on Sunday. We made, we've completed and exceeded a 5-year capital campaign with people moved to contribute, not because they have that many means, but for the sake of meaning and purpose and connection. And there still are a lot of challenges, especially for newer members. People who don't have pre-existing relationships have found it very difficult to feel the same sense of connection as those who, were founders or have known things before. Right? So, and we also took this opportunity to do a strategic learning process as well, to look at who we are in moving forward. And so I'll close as I began, and close in the tribute to the memories of both my parents, Lester and Sheila, who passed away in the last year and a half, not directly from COVID, but definitely COVID impacted the last year of their lives. But with inviting all of us to hold wherever our faith takes us, that we were made for these times, and also the possibility that these times are remaking us. These times are remaking us. And yet like gold, we can keep on shining. These times are remaking us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you for sharing the heartfelt and bittersweet moments. I would like to invite us to put our hand on our heart as our last movement, and taking some deep breaths in, honoring what was shared by Sean and letting it out. And another deep breath, bringing in love and letting out, allowing love to be in our space as we exhale. We have reached the 12 o'clock hour. Thank you everyone for your hope, your inspiration, the unity, the vulnerability, the courage, the honesty, the broadness of what you shared. And I feel very touched and honored to be in this community with all of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for our audience members for listening, and thank you to everyone on the recording. I hope that you enjoy what we've brought today, and I would just end this with thank you to Pam and to Aziz for helping us to organize this. To also thank you to Jocelyn, who is not here, who is instrumental in organizing this, as well as Sarah from Interfaith Philadelphia. So we're a small ragtag team of individual volunteers that put together these events, and we're just grateful for everyone's time and for sharing your energy and your love with us today.
You have time for question or no?
Officially, no, we don't have time. But I invite the panelists to stay on after, and we can have a couple minutes to chat with one another. So yeah, I'll keep the Zoom open until 12:15, and we can do a little bit of a chatting, get to know you if you have time for that and you're interested in doing that. And if there are questions from the audience, you can ask that during this time period. So it's maybe a little bit flexible, but I'll keep the Zoom open until 12:15, and I'll stop the recording now.